What you're about to hear is more than just a headline. It's a chain reaction that started with one tense moment on the street and then exposed something far bigger underneath. In this video, we're breaking down the newly surfaced ICE agent video from this week's Minnesota shooting, what it shows, what officials claim happened, and how that single incident allegedly led investigators into a massive criminal web, stretching across multiple states, with corruption reaching places most people never expect. So before we jump in, if you support clear explanations without noise, take 2 seconds to subscribe and share this video with someone who follows major U.S. crime and enforcement stories. It helps the channel a lot, and it helps more people understand what's actually being claimed step by step. Now stay with me because this starts with the moment the public saw first, the video showing the threat that officer was facing and the argument that what happened next was self-defense. And hey, don't click off early. The beginning is shocking, but the middle is where the full picture comes together, and the ending is where the alleged corruption angle changes everything. The story begins with a controversial shooting in Minneapolis during an immigration enforcement operation. According to the script you provided, an ICE agent fired his weapon after a confrontation involving a vehicle, and a 37-year-old woman died as a result. Right away, the incident split people into two camps. One side saw a tragedy and asked, why did an immigration operation end with a civilian dead? The other side focused on what law enforcement argued from the beginning. The officer believed his life was in immediate danger. Then came the political response that poured gasoline on the debate. Vice President J.D. Vance reacted to the new video on X, saying many people had been told the officer wasn't hit by a car and murdered an innocent woman, but that the reality is that his life was endangered and he fired in self-defense. Federal authorities, according to the narrative, backed the agent's self-defense claim, while the public response went in the opposite direction: scrutiny, protests, and outrage. And then there's the larger tension under everything: sanctuary city politics and the argument that dangerous offenders are released back into communities. The script includes a strong claim that sanctuary policies lead to public safety threats being released, naming extreme crimes and arguing law enforcement then has to go look for those people afterward. At this point in the story, most people think they're watching one incident, a shooting, a protest, and a debate. But the script says that gunshot didn't end anything. It opened the door. Here's where the story shifts from controversial shooting to what the narrative frames as a much larger operation. The script says that single shot didn't end the enforcement action. It triggered a broader federal investigation that uncovered a major criminal network, multi-state raids, and corruption reaching into city government. Think about how dramatic that claim is. Because it implies this wasn't just about one confrontation. It suggests that enforcement teams were stepping into something they didn't fully realize at first. Something structured, armed, funded, and protected. And then the timeline becomes cinematic. 3:12 a.m., South Minneapolis. While the city slept, unmarked federal vehicles moved into position around a 14-story hotel near the interstate. In seconds, exits were locked down, elevators were frozen, stairwells were taken by armed teams moving fast, doors were breached, flashlights cut hallways, occupants were forced to the ground, hands visible, rooms cleared one by one. The script emphasizes speed and control, floor by floor clearing, no blind spots, no time wasted, and the claimed outcome was enormous. 236 illegal immigrants detained, nearly 180 Somali nationals, 127 forged passports, stacks of prepaid phones, envelopes of cash hidden in ceiling panels. But then the immigration sweep allegedly turns into something else. 39 firearms, including loaded pistols and assault-style rifles, cocaine and fentanyl packaged for distribution, cash totals climbing past $4 million. At this moment, the story wants the viewer to realize something. If those claims are accurate, the hotel wasn't a shelter or a random gathering point, it was an armed distribution hub. And that is the first major turning point. What looked like a straightforward operation becomes a door into an underground system. After the raid, the script says the hotel itself began to speak. Because the seized phones wouldn't stop vibrating, missed calls, encrypted messages, delivery schedules frozen mid-sentence. DEA analysts, according to the narrative, worked through the night correlating numbers, locations, names, burner devices, falsified travel documents, and then the structure allegedly emerges, like scattered pieces forming one shape. At the center were two names that didn't fit street crime stereotypes. Khalif Nurelmi, 45, described as a Somali-born judge with a spotless public record; Hoden Ayla Noor, 42, described as a licensed attorney practicing immigration and criminal law. The script's point is blunt. On paper, community pillars; behind the scenes, alleged architects. And what they're accused of building is described as a pipeline that lasted nearly a decade. Migrants smuggled in, given false identities, then absorbed into the network as drivers, guards, couriers. The script stresses control through leverage, debt, threats, pressure on families abroad. It also claims their positions gave them protection: court access, delaying warrants; legal filing, stalling investigations; bribes, moving quietly. And then it goes even further, suggesting border officers, local police, and even senior law enforcement figures might have been compromised. This is the second major turning point. The alleged criminal operation is not just outside the system. It's portrayed as surviving because parts of the system protected it. 8:21 a.m., Minneapolis St. Paul International Airport. The script says Khalif and Hodan arrive separately, carrying minimal luggage. Newly issued passports, one-way international tickets, no lawyers, no public statements. To agents, the conclusion was unmistakable. They were running. ICE and FBI units tracked them through cameras and facial recognition. At 8:27 a.m., before boarding began, agents converged. The arrest lasted 22 seconds. No resistance, no speeches, just cuffs snapping shut in the middle of the departure hall. And the script frames this as the moment the network loses its shield: expanded warrants approved, financial trails unlocked, names buried for years surface all at once. The operation is now described as evolving into a national narcotics conspiracy, with Minneapolis as the starting point, not the whole map. This is the third turning point. The alleged brains are detained, and the investigation explodes outward. Here comes the part that reads like a coordinated campaign. 4 a.m. At the same moment, warrants go live across Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, Iowa, Missouri, and Michigan. The script claims more than 1,200 federal agents moved into position, with FBI command centers coordinating real-time feeds; ICE, DEA, and DHS operating as a single force. It describes sealed roads, monitored grids, military precision, and then it becomes violent. Northern Minnesota: a breach, flashbangs, gunfire; two suspects shot resisting arrest; one federal agent wounded in the shoulder. Milwaukee outskirts: an auto shop becomes a firefight, drugs stacked shoulder high. South Chicago: simultaneous entries across 3 floors, suspects fleeing, firing blindly, dumping weapons, agents pinning them down. By sunrise, the script says the scale is unmistakable: 73 raid locations with barricades, alarms, weapons staged for immediate use. It claims 4 firefights in the first 36 hours, 9 cartel enforcers killed resisting arrest, 2 federal agents wounded but surviving. Arrests climb: 412 by end of day 1, over 640 by end of day 2. And seizures match the violence: tons of cocaine, fentanyl, meth, tens of millions in cash, armories and ammunition by the crate, servers cloned mid-update. The script emphasizes proximity: targets near schools and neighborhoods, drugs beside children's beds, weapons in family homes, every breach risking civilian harm. It frames the final conclusion in this section as: this wasn't a sweep, it was a war. After the raids, the story shifts from action to consequences. Investigators begin reconstructing the timeline and allegedly find it's been active for nearly 10 years. What started as small-scale smuggling becomes industrial: drugs flowing north from Mexico and Colombia, crossing the border hidden in commercial shipments, then spreading outward from Minneapolis across the Midwest. The script claims analysts estimated hundreds of tons of narcotics moved through this network, and it paints the human cost: overdose deaths quadrupling in key Minnesota counties, fentanyl fatalities spiking in some places by over 300% in just 3 years, violent crime rising in parallel: homicides, armed robberies, turf disputes, executions. It also describes how migrants were allegedly forced into roles immediately, driving shipments, guarding stash houses, trapped by fabricated debts, threatened with exposure, warned family back home would suffer if they refused, and it pushes a central argument. The violence wasn't random and overdoses weren't accidents. They were predictable outcomes of a machine designed for profit. This is where the story becomes less about raids and more about what the community lived through: neighborhoods hollowed out, addictions spreading faster than public health responses, the system failing because the wrong people were protected. Then the investigation turns inward. The script claims the network didn't survive a decade through secrecy alone. It survived because parts of the system were compromised. Interrogations align, names repeat, payments match bank records, phone logs connect officers to vehicles that should never have passed inspection. Over the next 72 hours, internal affairs moves alongside federal prosecutors. Subpoenas issued quietly, lockers searched, home safes opened. The script claims 12 local police officers arrested, some taking cash to ignore stops, others warning about raids. One officer allegedly escorted drug vehicles clearing intersections under routine patrol. Then comes a name it calls unthinkable: a sitting police chief accused of taking payments to redirect manpower and suppress complaints. Emails allegedly show interference, complaints labeled clerical errors, evidence buried. The narrative expands beyond police. Municipal officials approving suspicious contracts tied to shell companies, immigration consultants funneling clients into the network, court clerks altering filing dates. Prosecutors call it an ecosystem, not one bad actor, an environment where corruption becomes routine. And the fallout is described as immediate: departments placed under federal oversight, pending cases reopened, convictions tied to compromised officers flagged, careers ending in handcuffs. Then the script closes the loop with a what changed sequence: sirens less frequent, helicopters gone, corners going quiet, the flow of drugs severed. It claims that within 30 days, overdose admissions dropped nearly 40% in key Minnesota hospitals. Prosecutors file hundreds of indictments: trafficking, weapons, racketeering, human smuggling, money laundering, corruption. And for Khalif and Hodan, it says assets frozen, properties seized, credentials destroyed, reputations collapsing. But the deeper message is the lesson: institutions don't fail all at once. They erode one compromised decision at a time. Corruption hides behind familiarity, legal language, reputations, procedure. And once the internal shield is removed, the network collapses quickly. Accountability works when applied without exception. And that brings us to the end of the story as it's written in your script: a chain of events that begins with one officer, one confrontation, and one gunshot, and then spirals into a far larger claim: a multi state cartel style operation, allegedly shielded by corruption inside institutions people are supposed to trust. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you think the bigger danger in stories like this is the criminals themselves or the corruption that lets them operate undisturbed? If you made it this far, thank you. Seriously. And if you want more structured breakdowns like this, please subscribe and share this video. It's the easiest way to support the channel, and it helps this kind of content reach people who don't want spin, just the full narrative in order. Also, don't leave yet. Check the next video on your screen, because if this story grabbed your attention, the next one connects to the same theme. What happens when systems meant to protect the public start protecting the wrong people? Until next time, stay aware, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.